Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks again for being here on a Friday afternoon to spend some time talking about SBA loans and the PPP and loan forgiveness. I am Brian Manning. I'm a financial advisor here in Nashville for Pinnacle, and I am thankful to be joined by Lane Rhodes, our resident SBA expert. Lane and the team have spent countless hours working through first understanding the information and then processing some loans through the system, and now working with us to understand all of the guidelines for loan forgiveness. So she will be spending some time with us today to cover what we know right now and then try to answer some of your questions along the way. To that end, a few housekeeping items. We have opened up the Q&A for this webinar, so just please submit your questions through the Q&A aspect of this, and we'll be watching those. It's likely we'll have several hundred people participate in this webinar this afternoon, so we'll do our best to answer the questions, but we may not be able to answer your specific question. If you don't get a specific answer to your question, please feel free to contact one of our local financial advisors and have a conversation about your business. And we also encourage you to talk with your CPA and your attorney to make sure you really understand all of the guidelines and information around the PPP and the loan forgiveness aspect of this. I think it's also worth mentioning that right now there isn't official guidance out from the SBA on loan forgiveness. What we're coming to you this afternoon with, and what we'll continue to provide you, is our best understanding of what the provisions have been put out. We've got a team that have read the CARES Act completely and have discussed it and talk about our approach for how we're going to advise you as our clients as we walk through this together. It's completely likely that you'll get differing information from another trusted advisor, and that's okay. All the information's not out right now, and it's our best guess as to how we read the information and try to communicate that to you. And we're typically going to err on the side of being conservative. We want to protect you. We want to walk you through this well and try to make sure you understand the information. We'll provide this website a few times throughout the webinar, but we would also encourage you to continue to check pnfp.com/PPP forgiveness. That's where we have all of the general information around loan forgiveness and also some very helpful tools, some calculators that'll help you as you walk through the process of trying to get all your documentation in order to make sure your loan is forgiven. So with that, I will bring in my friend Lane Rhodes. Lane, it's Friday afternoon after another long week of PPP talk. Why don't you just give us a quick update of where we sit at the end of the week?
Hey, Brian, great to see you again. It has been another long PPP week. So we are in the midst of round two, and the money did not go out quite as quickly as we thought it would, which I think is a good thing because I think it shows that business owners have either already gotten their hands on this money or that the loan volumes kind of slowed down some. Banks have actually been able to work through all their applications. I've heard that from a couple of small community banks that they've actually worked through 100%. I know we're kind of right there with them. We've worked through about 99% of our applications. But, you know, one of the things that I think is great about this round is the dollar amount has gone down significantly. So we're really seeing that the money is making it into the hands of small business owners. SBA's given the smaller community banks designated times where they can go through and submit applications for their business owners. And so it's nice that they cut off the robo submissions that the larger banks were using, where they were just cramming thousands of applications through at one time. And so here we are with, at this point, with both rounds combined, I mean, we're over 500 billion in money that's gone out to small businesses out there to help with payroll expenses. So I think that's a huge accomplishment in a very short amount of time. I mean, this program just rolled out the first week of April, and here we are on May 1st. So it really hasn't even been in effect for a full month, and we've put that much capital back in the hands of small business owners.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Lane. This really has been a fast and furious process. I know it's been a lot of information for business owners to gather and try to work with their bank to get the application through and funded, and a lot of anxiety through the process. I know it's been a lot of stress on the banking side of taking those applications in and moving them through, and also on the SBA side and processing all of the requests. I think a great place maybe for us to kick off the conversation today is maybe to go back to the beginning and have a conversation around the certifications that business owners made on the front end of this process. Again, it was It was a crazy time. The information came out very fast. We began taking applications very fast. And it's completely understandable that business owners just went through the application, got their documentation together, and got it to us for processing, and maybe didn't even fully understand the program at that point in time. So would you mind just doing a brief overview of the program? Go over a brief synopsis of what the business owner certified as they submitted their application, and then we can kind of walk through where the forgiveness aspect is now on the backside of it.
Definitely, Brian. I think those are all kind of great places to start, just to go back to the beginning here. So we're fondly calling this program now PPP. And what we need to remember is that PPP stands for Paycheck Protection Program. First word being paycheck. So the government put this program into place to help business owners continue to pay payroll while their doors might be closed. That has been a challenge for a lot of business owners, trying to figure out how to keep employees paid while their businesses are still shut down. And so for some people, it may not make sense to continue paying people if they know their doors aren't going to be able to be open in that 8-week time period. And there is some uncertainty out there. So we want to kind of go back to the original application, and I have it here in front of me. So if for any business owner that completed this, if you still don't have a copy, definitely reach out to one of us and we can give it to you. But there were several little spots where you had to initial, and any place the SBA makes you initial something on an application, that's of importance to them. They want you to, you're not just signing the bottom of the page, you're initialing that you specifically read that one section and you're going to adhere to it. So the very second part that business owners initialed, and this is the one that Secretary Mnuchin has brought up several times this week, and that is, current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the applicant being the business. So that's an important point to make, Brian, that we're getting a lot of questions around right now, because with the secretary bringing that up, that business owners truly needed to show that they had a need for this loan in order to support their ongoing operations. So that's the first one that people certified. The second one I think is just as important as that one, and that is the funds will be used to retain workers, maintain payroll, or make mortgage interest payments, lease payments, utility payments as specified under the Paycheck Protection Program rules. I understand if the funds are knowingly used for an unauthorized purpose, the federal government may hold me legally liable for such charges of fraud. So that is also important, that business owners need to remember that this program was put in place specifically for payroll, and that if you knowingly took this loan, you don't intend to use it for payroll and you're going to use it for something else, the government is considering that fraud at this point in time. They did put out 2 loan programs at the same time, the PPP and the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And the Economic Injury Disaster Loan can be used for any operational expenses. In fact, the way that program's qualified is they look at your financials to determine what 6 months of operating expenses would be, and you can use that money to pay your ongoing operating expenses. So payroll protection was just designed to cover payroll and a few of those operating expenses. So the interest expense on mortgages, utility payments, and leases. And we're still waiting for further guidance on exactly what SBA defines as a utility and exactly what they're defining as an eligible interest expense. So we're assuming mortgage interest expense to be the interest expense that's on your permanent business location, not to be mortgage interest expense on potential investment properties that you have. So there's a little bit of fuzziness there around exactly what the SBA is saying when they say interest expense on mortgages. So more to come from that, but just wanted to go back and kind of reiterate those 2 things that people were certifying. Another thing that they certified under the application was, I understand that for loan forgiveness, I will need to provide a sum of documents, including payroll costs, covered mortgage interest expense payments, covered rent payments, and covered utilities, to not exceed more than 25 of the forgivable amount of the loan, for these non-payroll related costs. So only 25% of the loan can be used on non-payroll related expenses. So you need to make sure you're using at least 75% of the loan on payroll, and then you can use the additional 25% on those three categories, but you can't use it on categories other than that if you're seeking for forgiveness. We understand that you may accidentally or may decide to use the funds for other business expenses, but you need to know those other business expenses would not count towards any of your forgiveness. And if the government deems that you intentionally use those on ineligible uses, they may deem your entire loan as not forgivable. We're hoping that won't be the case, and we're hoping that if you used any portion of it on payroll, that whatever you use on payroll will be forgivable. But like you said, Brian, we're still waiting on guidance from SBA on what exactly they're going to be looking for when it comes for the forgivable component.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful, Lane, because I know in a lot of conversations that I've had, a lot of people are hung up on that 75% aspect. And a lot of assumptions are made that if they make 75% of that, the loan proceeds towards payroll, that their loan will be 100% forgiven. And the reality is that there's still some money that's left, the 25% aspect that can be used for payroll. They can use all of the funds for payroll. I think that would be ideal. But if not, they do have to fall into those qualified expenses. Otherwise, they could risk a portion of those loan proceeds not being forgiven. So I think that's very helpful information. If we look at forgiveness, Lane, let's talk about the logistics of that. So as we understand it now, when does the window of having to document everything, when do people have to have the money used by? When does the clock start ticking? What are the specifics that we know right now as far as the forgiveness period of the loan?
Yeah, so that window starts, their 8-week window period does start on the day they receive the money from us, from the bank. So the day we release the money. So if they got a check, it's actually going to be on the day that the bank cut the check because that money left the bank. Or if they wanted it deposited right into their account, it's going to be on the day the money went into their account. And so that's when that 8-week window begins. And with SBA, as they define it right now, it's true cash-based accounting. So for instance, if you got the money on May 1st, on today, that would be the day that you could start accounting for payroll expenses to use that money. So if you had a payroll period, that accrued payroll 2 weeks prior to May 1st, but you pay it out after May 1st, those days may not actually count towards your forgiveness component. But we're still waiting for clarification because we're actually hopeful that, SBA will broaden that range a little bit, because we know that especially with payroll expenses, utilities expenses, most of these expenses are occurred over a month-long period, and it's going to be really hard to kind of squish them in to fit that specific 8-week period as it applies to that exact business owner. So we're hoping that there's going to be a little bit of leeway there for business owners as to exactly how to account for those payroll expenses.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. So the payroll financial aspect of it is one. The other piece that comes into play is a headcount, is an employee headcount. And David Williams, who's on with us today, has a real specific question that I think is helpful. It's one that I know that I've heard from a lot of clients. And he asked about if he had an employee that he needed to let go. And then what does he do about hiring someone back? And if he lets someone go during this period, but does have a replacement for them, will he still qualify for 100% forgiveness, or does that change how his loan will be looked at? What could you speak to as far as that's concerned, Lane?
Yeah, no, David, that's a great question you have. And that's not one that other business owners haven't asked as well. So that's a really common question. We're viewing this as just a head count number SBA is looking for. So if you had to lay somebody off and you can't bring the same person back, if you just brought another full-time equivalent back in their place, you should still be okay. There's two kind of guidelines that SBA, two periods they've given to us that are kind of the barometer periods to give you a number, a look back number to look at to determine what your payroll number or your headcount number needs to be for the forgiveness component. And so we're going to look at what your employee count is over your 8 weeks, and then we're going to back to either the time periods of February 15th, 2019 to June 30th, 2019, or we're going to look at the first of this year, so truly January 1, 2020 through February 29th, 2020. And those are the two windows SBA's given, and the business owner can pick which one they want to use to come up with the head count number so that we can make sure that you're staying in the head count window that SBA is looking for to qualify that head count component of the calculation for forgiveness.
Yeah, that's helpful. So Jules has a question with respect to 1099 contract employees. And I know there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of confusion during the application process about will they be counted or won't they be counted, and can we include them and all of that. So what is your guidance for people, business owners who do employ 1099 contractors as a part of their business? Can they be included in their payroll process during the forgiveness period, or is that something that needs to be excluded?
Well, Jules, we don't have all the details yet from SBA on that. So one of the things that we did know on the front end was SBA came back and they excluded 1099s from the payroll calculation to determine what your business's payroll expenses would be for that 2.5 times, which then became your loan amount. So we're assuming on the back end that they don't want you to include 1099 in your payroll that you then pay out, since those 1099 contractors are eligible to go apply for the PPP loan, get it, and pay themselves over the 8-week time period. That's how we view it today. However, we haven't gotten the final guidance from SBA on the back end. So they may come back and say that you can include some 1099s in that number. We just don't know that specifically yet.
And so then to build off of that, I know one of the common questions that we've had are for 1099 contractors who actually applied themselves for the loan, or for those who are self-employed, taking ownership draws and that type of thing. How would you recommend they go about documenting their pay during that 8-week window? Is there any guidance that you would offer them that would be any different than what they normally do? If they're just used to kind of taking money as they need it out of the business, or taking money at random, would you give any structure to how they operate during that 8-week period?
Yeah, Brian, that is a question that we're getting a lot from just small business owners, whether you're a sole proprietor, whether you're a partner and you take partner draws, and then the 1099s. One of the things that we've put together, and we're trying to keep this as simple as possible. We've seen lots of complex spreadsheets that, CPA and law firms have put together, and those are great, and they probably work for some real sophisticated businesses. But if you're just a sole proprietor or a single contractor, 1099 contractor, you just need to keep it simple and use our 8-week spreadsheet. It breaks it down over each 8 weeks. Take one draw for yourself once a week over that 8-week time period. Make sure that you don't pay yourself more than the maximum amount, which would be the $15,383 over the full 8-week time period. So that's for all 8 weeks combined. And you should be good, and your money should be completely forgivable. So that's what we're recommending. If you're a small business owner that you currently just, you're a 1099 individual, so you maybe haven't gone and opened up a business checking account before and you run everything through one personal account, we would probably recommend you open up a separate account so that you can physically write a check from that PPP account where you got your PPP money. Write yourself a check then to where you have money going into your personal account, and you can show that paper trail for SBA over the 8 weeks that you took eight draws going in, going out of your PPP money over to yourself personally. We may not see that that's going to be necessary from SBA, but it can't hurt, and it gives a paper trail. And that's really what SBA, through their other programs that we offer, that's what they're looking for when we come back to them with our loan proceeds. They want to see a tracking and a paper trail of exactly how people have spent that money. So keeping a paper trail of everything. Same thing when you write your utility bill expenses, give us a copy of that utility bill and then show us with a matching check where you wrote and paid for that expense, and we can match them up together and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt to the SBA that you paid for that expense and it was a valid expense.
Yeah, at this point, there is no such thing as too much paperwork and too much documentation. We would strongly encourage everyone to keep up with all of their information and be sure that you're documenting. And just like on the front end with the application process, we were asking for a lot of information on the front end, and then we got some additional guidance that made us realize that for certain loan amounts, there was only specific information needed. But again, we're always going to err on the conservative side and make sure that you've got everything that you need. So I think Lane's point is excellent to make sure that you document. Lane, it looks like Chris has a question about finally receiving EIDL funding. So you think you mentioned previously that the initial plan was to have the EIDL fund within a few days of submitting application, and then the idea would be that the PPP would pay off those EIDL funds once it funded, but it actually happened for a lot of people in reverse. So Chris's question is concerning, he received his EIDL money, and how does that impact his PPP funds, and what does he need to think about as we go through this process?
Well, that's great to hear somebody actually got ELD money already, because we have heard from most people they haven't gotten their EIDL money. But one thing to remember with EIDL, they had a grant component. So if you got a grant from it, that grant component actually deducts from your forgiveness on the PPP loan. So please remember that on the backside. And then if you use your EIDL loan for payroll, you need to make sure that you pay off the EIDL portion you used on payroll from your PPP loan.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. So Meredith has a question trying to understand about rent and forgiveness. And so she says, if the corporation pays rent to an LLC that is owned by the individual who has ownership in the corporation, how does that rent factor in, and how can they document that? So I know we've got a lot of businesses where the physical location that the business operates out of is oftentimes owned by the business owners themselves, or maybe within a partnership, and then the business pays rent to the owners to occupy the space. How do they go about documenting that from a forgiveness standpoint?
Yeah, so, really there should be a lease agreement in place. They're wanting to see that was in place by February 15th of this year in order for it to be an eligible rent expense. If you could go back and show through historicals that you historically have paid that amount of rent, if you don't have a physical rent lease agreement in place, I would think that would be okay. We don't have full guidance from SBA yet on that, but that is going to be the best way to document a lease payment, is going to be to have a physical copy of the lease. Usually landlords send, a monthly statement or something like that, kind of keeping up with that. But, if it is a small business owner that they own their own building and a real estate holding company, and then they lease it back to the business, that's very common. So if you don't have a lease currently in place, what we would want to see is probably through bank statement records that historically you have paid that exact amount of rent to the business owners for the use of that office space or whatever, business space that you're renting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Also a really good time, I think, to talk about just some general practices with respect to how you handle these funds. And that's really that don't do anything that's really out of character for how you normally operate your business. Maybe not overthinking this process too much, but really just treat these funds as you would normally treat money in and out of your business, and not go overboard and trying to do too many things that you wouldn't normally do. If you've had a history, just like Lane said, of paying rent to the ownership for use of a facility, then that's just fine, because we'll be able to document that and go back and look. But don't take this as an opportunity now to start doing some different things with the funds, because that's what's really going to cause scrutiny and may bring you under some fire when you don't want to do that. Lane, it looks like we've got another question from Patty. She's trying to understand about being self-employed independent contractor. She says that none of her rent and utilities are allowed due to the fact that her office is actually at her house. So I know we have a lot of people who are either independent contractors or they're sole proprietors, and they don't have a physical business location. They're actually operating out of their home. Do you have any guidance or any understanding about how their personal residential mortgage interest might be included, or personal utilities and that type of thing if somebody's operating out of their home?
We don't have any guidance yet from SBA on that. What I would encourage people to do is defer back to IRS rules on if you have a home office and what you can deduct, given IRS rules. And that's probably going to be a good rule of thumb. But like I said, we don't have guidance from SBA, so they may say that those are not eligible uses of the funds at this point in time, but we don't know that. For those, individuals, it wouldn't just hurt, you're 100% the business owner. You can use 100% of it on your payroll, and then, your payroll expenses, then whatever you paid yourself in theory would then go to help pay your mortgage and utilities and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Mackenzie has a question about rehiring some employees and walking them through the payroll process. A lot of people, unfortunately, have had to let some people go, and now they're trying to bring them back. And if they've been collecting unemployment, what kind of guidance would you offer with respect to how they treat unemployment payments and now beginning to have payroll? How would you recommend them documenting that?
Brian, I want to make sure I'm completely understanding that question. So they want to know how to document the unemployment, or just document that they're hiring back the employee?
Yeah, when they rehire the employee, is there a specific time frame that they have to do that? Does it have to happen immediately, or can they take it all the way, up until the very end of that 8-week period?
Yeah, so that is a great point. So the way the rule reads right now from SBA is they have to bring back the employee by June 30th. But, to get the maximum amount of forgiveness, if you're not paying that person over the 8 weeks, you're not going to get the maximum forgiveness if you brought them back, right at June 30th. But you do have to bring them back by June 30th for their FTE to count in that FTE head count number. So that's one of the things you would want to remember when bringing employees back. But I know a lot of people are saying they're getting paid more to sit at home on unemployment, but I think what people need to realize also that are on unemployment, that they have to show that they don't have a valid job offer out there. And so if their employer is offering them a job to come back, then really they're ineligible for unemployment and they need to go back to work. But I know that's not always how the system works.
Yeah, it can be challenging for sure. I know a lot of questions that we've gotten with a head count standpoint, and I think we need to make sure we clarify what we understand right now. That if someone makes an effort, if they've had to let somebody go through this process, or maybe they've had someone voluntarily leave their business during this time frame, to your understanding, Lane, this is not a situation where it's an all or nothing with respect to forgiveness. If they either didn't use all of the funds up to the 75% number for payroll, or if it's a headcount situation where maybe they don't have exactly the same number of employees back, is it your understanding, am I correct in saying that it's not an all or nothing situation, that it will be a pro rata or a percentage of the forgiveness that'll be involved at that point?
Yeah, Brian, that's our understanding today, is that it would be pro rata. So we're hoping that, if you still use 50% of it on payroll and brought back 50% of your workforce, that you get 50% of your loan forgiven. So that's kind of how we're viewing it as of today, but more guidance to come.
Yep, and I think that's also another opportunity to plug our forgiveness website. That's pnfp.com/PPP forgiveness. We'll continue to update that as we get further guidance and more information about what is forgivable and what are not. And right now we've got what we know up there and some really helpful tools and some calculators. So be sure and check that out, but continue to go back to that website and check as we'll update it as we learn more. Lane, it looks like we've walked through a lot of our participants' questions or gotten sort of the general information there. Is there anything that you would offer us as we kind of wrap up this week with PPP?
Yeah, so Just like you said, continue to check our website, go back and, look at that certification, make sure you still kind of fall within the guidelines that you originally certified the money for. And then just make sure you're documenting how you use this money so that it can be forgivable on the back end. We're waiting on procedures from SBA of exactly how that forgiveness process is going to work. They have said that, loans over 2 million will go directly to SBA for processing. So we're assuming that those are probably going to take a little bit longer for them to determine forgiveness, get the money back to the bank so that then the bank can actually pay off the loan. Because like we said in our last webinar, this is actually Pinnacle money that we've loaned out, and we're going to be waiting from the government to give it back so that we can actually pay these loans off. And so there may be a window of time where the business owner, before they get the loan forgiven, they actually have to start making principal and interest payments on the loan. So that's something to remember. There's a 6-month deferment there where we're deferring full principal and interest payments for the first 6 months of the loan. But then after that deferment, the loan's got to be paid back over 18 months. So that's definitely something good to remember. One other thing that I wanted to mention out there, just in case there's any business owners that were affected by the tornado, the SBA's window for applications for the disaster relief, it ends on May 3rd. So there's only 2 days left to get that. And they take applications any time of day, any day of the week. So you do have 2 days left to get your applications in for that. So if you've been affected and you're not really sure how to apply for that money with SBA, let me know. You do that directly through SBA, but I can definitely put you in contact and give you the paperwork that you need to get done to get that process moving.
I think that's helpful, Lane. We actually had one last question from Donald that I do think can be applicable to a lot of people. He asked the question about having mostly part-time employees and talking about a calculate of an FTE or a full-time equivalent. What is your guidance? What information do we have right now about understanding part-time employees and how to calculate a full-time equivalent?
We don't actually have full guidance from SBA on that yet. What I would tell him to use is probably what the Labor Department uses right now as far as what would count in that equation. But we do not have guidance from SBA as of right now of exactly how to calculate what a full-time equivalent would be.
Yeah, so again, another great opportunity to plug the website of pnfp.com/PPP forgiveness. That's where we will update all the information and update our calculators to help you do all those calculations for yourself. But again, we also encourage you to and lean on your CPA to get additional guidance. They may have some other tools like Lane mentioned earlier that'll help you walk through that information and can give you good counsel. Lane, I think that's a good place to end our conversation. Anything as we wrap up?
Hope everybody has a great weekend and keep the questions coming. I'm sure we'll do some more of these in the upcoming weeks. And as soon as we get the final guidance from SBA on the forgiveness process, we will definitely let you guys know. We'll get our website updated and we'll definitely do another Q&A for people to ask all kinds of questions to us.
Awesome, Lane. Well, thanks for your time, and thank you all for spending the afternoon with us. Like Lane said, if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to your local financial advisor and have a specific conversation about your business. Continue to check our website, pnfp.com/PPP forgiveness, for all of the information and tools that we have accessible. And we'll continue to do these webinars as we learn more information and try to do some Q&A to answer your questions. So we're thankful for you spending the afternoon with us, and we look forward to talking to you soon. I hope everybody has a great weekend.